Hello and welcome back to Shelve Your Boots. I'm Katie, the face behind Shelve Your Boots, and this week we have two guests on today that I saw through LinkedIn. Well, Kate, I saw through LinkedIn of some announcements that she had on an area that I personally hadn't been aware of. But once I started to read into it and sort of see what you were doing, Kate, for me, as we said on the phone, really made sense. But I'll let you introduce yourself and sort of the campaign that you have at the moment, and then we'll hand over to Paul. And
So
what
I'm
you've
Kate
been
England.
involved with, Paul.
I inadvertently came into this space due to need, really. My husband served with 1st Queen Dragoons Guards, and he started on a really slow decline in health, both mentally and physically. And we were coming in contact with various different charities, various NHS organisations, local and national, and we weren't getting anywhere. Actually, things were just progressively getting worse and to extremes where James was getting in contact with the justice system, where there was suicide involved, or suicide attempts, I should say, and something had to give. Something wasn't right. The process was not working. And the more I started to delve into things, this is how I started looking at traumatic brain injury. And actually, the Will Smith film Concussion was my real wake-up call, because it was just, one of those nighttime views.
Okay.
Where actually I was upstairs alone and I was watching it, and I was like, this is so similar. It's unreal. And that kind of started me down that route of thinking, and it became a bit of a rabbit hole, really, because the more I looked, the more things connected, the more people I spoke to, and it's where I am now, basically, just via need.
Yeah, personal need and relationship need. Yeah. So Paul, you've also got involved in this space, but not as a veteran yourself, not as related to anyone that's gone through this, but purely through kind of journalism and research side of it. So how did you and Kate end up?
Yeah, I mean, my
Sitting up
interest
in the
in this
middle
is,
and
is
getting involved
professional, as you
with
say.
this?
Although I am a veteran myself, but it was so long ago, I can barely remember. But yeah, I've been working at ITN for, I don't know, a very long time, mostly doing sort of foreign affairs and so on, and sort of more recently been based in the UK. And a sort of mutual friend who is really interested in this has been trying to get me interested in this professionally for quite a long time, and I was putting him off because I kind of imagined it might be something like, Gulf War syndrome, or one of those things where the science isn't there, or it's contradictory, or you never really get to the bottom of what's happening, and it's a lot of investment for something that may not be that tangible. And eventually agreed to spend a day reading whatever he sent me, and he sent me a lot of some press coverage, but lots and lots of scientific papers. And by the time I'd finished reading it, I couldn't believe what I was reading and what I was learning. So I sort of rang him back and said, "Okay, I'm on. Someone needs to be looking at this." And the first thing he said I needed to do is to speak to Kate. So that's what I did.
Yeah, and I think, like I say, you've appeared quite a lot, especially on my socials. I think just through algorithms and doing this. But then when I've spoken to other individuals in the veteran community, your name's been brought up quite a lot, Kate, as this person, as pretty much an example of a person that is fighting so hard for something that shouldn't be that hard to fight for, in the world we live in today. And you really are. I mean, this hasn't been a matter of a few months. This has been years so far. When did you first start on this road fighting?
It was all the
and awareness.
Too many years, well over 10 years it's been. I mean, I've been engaging with people and organisations like NHS England Armed Forces since 2017, I think it was. So that in itself, even the progress I've made for my husband, and it doesn't feel like that much. It's kind of 2 steps forward, 2 steps back, and maybe half a step forward at points. The time I've been doing this does not reflect how far we should have got, I should say. The system isn't there And it's actually, it feels like it's been built to break James and myself and our family. It hasn't been a supportive system. It's actually been one I've just had to test and test and test. And I'll say that within, it will sound like a negative thing, but actually within that, there's been some positive points because I've met some really good people along the way. Researchers, professionals like Paul. I've met families, I've met spouses, veterans within the community. And in an area where we were told well over more than once that we were unique, that James was unique, that we're one of many, and actually that's where my strength has grown by realizing that, and not to be told, no, you can't, no, this isn't possible, no, you can't do that, you'll have to follow this structure, or you'll have to follow this. And every point we've had to follow it and show it that our system fails, or that charity fails, or government departments fail. And we've made small inroads in things like local ICBs, but it's so much more needs to be done. These small wins are far from where we need to be because there's so many other people, and I see it daily and I hear from people daily, and it breaks my heart that the system is breaking and there is no fallback for them. I'm quite, I would say I'm quite an educated person within this area. My knowledge is quite vast. Yeah, I'm struggling to manage and navigate this system. I mean, what's that about? It's ridiculous. If James was on his own, he would have ended in the justice system, in prison, or just not here. It's just a fact. And so how many more people does that relate to? How many poor people are in the justice system? How many people have inadvertently taken their own lives, or been self-medicating, sent down a rabbit warren of different systems on medication they shouldn't maybe not be on, and just repetitively going through that system. It's not good enough.
So, like from the conversations we've had before, like the heart of essentially the matter is, at the moment in the UK it's not recognised medically. Is that correct? But it is recognised in other countries, and there's tests that are actually recognised in other countries but aren't here. So even though you've had tests done elsewhere, dedicated people here won't even really accept what's in front of them. I
don't know how Paul feels, but the knowledge just isn't here. There isn't the expertise within the country. What is there is really hard to get to, and any diagnostics within the NHS, there's no specific pathway for it. And so you end up having to self-fund, which is expensive. Normal people can't. James had a meg scan quite a few years ago now, but that was huge. It's thousands of pounds, and that's not a thing that's available to most people. We were very lucky. We crowdfunded, and so it was paid for that way. But that isn't an option for everybody, and especially the numbers of people we're talking about.
There's this bizarre mix between this kind of world-leading research in the UK as well as in the States. There's some fantastic science happening and some amazing people working on that science. And then there's this kind of 10-year, 20-year gap between that and clinicians, doctors, the people you see, reading that science, understanding that science and agreeing that science. But there's none of the peer review is suggesting anything other than what all the science is saying, and that's 3,000 plus published peer-reviewed publications from world-leading institutes, world-leading authorities. No one's contradicting any of this. No one's arguing that any of this is wrong. It's just no one's rushing this into the clinical space. So you end up seeing the sort of typical trajectories. You see your GP with the symptoms of traumatic brain injury, they'll refer you to psychiatry. Psychiatrists will diagnose PTSD in many cases because there is some overlap in symptoms, and they will. I mean, we've seen some notes. Kate's seen more than me, but I've seen some medical reports where they're twisting themselves in knots to diagnose something psychiatric against a background of a medical history of blast exposure, every symptom of traumatic brain injury. The clinicians are not reading anything into this store, they're not reading any of the science, they're simply looking for a head injury. And if they don't see a head injury, then it's psychiatric, and that's as far as it goes. They're just not up with the science, and it's not necessarily their individual fault. You know, the Royal Colleges are supposed to be promulgating this knowledge. We get that doctors are busy people and all the rest of it, but ultimately the buck stops with the government. You know, the government could change the awareness here with a flick of a switch. They could do it tomorrow, and that's not happening because they have convinced themselves that this is an American problem and something that, yes, they understand the science, they don't argue with it, but they think it's niche and it affects a handful of people, and that's just, in my experience anecdotally, and in Kate's far more so, that's not true.
Yeah, and I think what's frustrating is, especially during the sort of the Afghan and Iraq years, that there was, I can remember, especially sort of press-wise, and probably something that was kind of pushed by the government to the forefront, was kind of the amazing sort of medical advancements that we were learning in terms of the golden hour in Afghanistan, and that direct care and sort of aftercare in terms of loss of limb, you know, quadriplegic care, that was, you know, something that really came on leaps and bounds because of what we were facing. And yet something from the same era is just quietly just being ignored in the corner, which is frustrating when they were parallel at the same time. They were happening at the same time. But it's almost like this one kind of makes us look better as a government versus actually, do we really want to open that can of worms on that side of the fence a little bit? And you know, it just feels a bit, well, we were able to do it on this side and really advance medicine and really advance care. So why is this not possible on
It
this
is
side?
complex. It is a complex issue, and there are gaps in the scientific knowledge. You know, there are things we don't know. But the government seemed to have set, and the medical establishment seemed to have set the bar for doing anything as complete scientific certainty. And that's not a bar that we set for any other neurological condition. You know, what causes Alzheimer's, what causes motor neuron disease, what causes Parkinson's. There's gaps in the knowledge for all of these neurological conditions. Yet we have a pathway, we have therapies, we spend loads of money exploring more therapies. You know, that here they essentially seem to be saying that until we're 100% certain about every aspect of this, we're not going to do anything. And you know, that doesn't seem to me to fit well with the Veterans Covenant, and it's certainly letting very real people who served, and I include Kate as well because they also serve, the families are also serving every bit as much, and it's letting those people down.
Yeah, and like you say, Kate, it's you yo-yoing back and forth. You're going down it's like everyone's become a guinea pig in their own right, of try this medication, try this treatment, try this therapy, try this, in the hope that something might work.
Yeah.
But everyone's doing it on this individual basis instead of,
there's no collective
collectively
data really
looking at it.
about how many veterans are suffering that may have a traumatic brain injury. The one service that should be a feeder NHS wise, the veteran service, is Op Restore. But Op Restore don't have to take you. Op Restore are a referral service in themselves, so they only have so many pathways they can send you anyway. But unless they're accepting you, they're not keeping that data. So that veteran that's been referred by their GP, hopefully, that knows about the service, because that information, although you would think would be openly available to GPs, isn't really well known. Op Restore, Op Courage is the one service that has had that media attention. Op Restore hasn't. Op Restore's that physical health side. Unless they're actually feeding through and actually being assessed properly, going through their service notes, going through their medical notes, and actually having that one-to-one holistically, because I think Paul and me can both tell you, we're becoming experts in the room when somebody walks in and there's a group of people, we can kind of go, that person is exhibiting symptomatic. But unless you're seeing that person, which they don't do, they work off a very limited amount of information from your GP that sends, those maybe with TBI aren't being recorded. So actually, we don't know true numbers. Although the MOD, a representative from the MOD has said there could be thousands. How do we know that? Because we aren't letting those guys and girls feed through the system for data, for, you know, to know how many are symptomatic, how many, you know, they may not have TBI, that may be symptomatic of something else, but unless you're actually seeing them physically one to one, we can't make that you know, that diagnosis, that well, not diagnosis, but that overall holistic look at them.
But
It's
even just a veterans
a terrible
cohort,
system.
you know, just let's
Yeah,
scan 500 veterans, or take one unit and do follow through, or however you choose to do it. There's just nothing happening in that space. The closest there is the advanced study, but it's not specifically looking at exposure to repeated low-level blast. I mean, it will be interesting. It's very thorough science, and it will be really interesting when it reports. But it's not. It's one of the modules on it. It's not a specific to that, and it's mostly dealing with polytrauma. A lot of guys there will have been, you know, badly hurt in maybe their first week in country. You know, they may not have been exposed to blast over a period of time, so they may not be the most vulnerable or relevant cohort. That's not to say it won't be interesting. It's certainly not to cast aspersions on the science. It's top quality research. But they could really easily, you know, take. I would love to, if we had the funds, I would love to take 50 people, 100 people with CPTSD diagnoses and scan them all and see what happens. Because everyone who has been scanned, as far as I think we know, Kate, has shown neurotrauma. Every single one of those people had a psychiatric diagnosis prior to the scan. So something's going wrong systematically.
Yeah. So if we get to sort of, you know, where, if someone's listening to this thinking, you know, I did serve, I did go out there, what kind of group of people are probably at high risk of having this? Is it, you know, like you say, level of blast exposure over a certain amount of time? What kind of things, you know, if people listening to this, alarm bells might be ringing, thinking, well, actually, I was serving there and I was exposed to that, and I've had a lot of issues.
Yeah, sorry, Paul could probably answer this better, but that, to me, this isn't.
In a nutshell, it's armour, infantry, artillery, engineers, EOD, special forces, Navy divers perhaps. It's those people who are occupationally routinely exposed to blast. But you do, you know, some people do get acute traumatic brain injury from a single blast or two or three incidents close to each other. So you do come across Royal Army Medical Corps, you do come across people who may not be normally exposed to blast, but who have been operationally rather than occupationally, if you get the distinction. So you do come across other people, but almost everyone fits into one of those occupations. And you look at something like armour, for instance, you think, well, they're inside, battened down, you should be protected from that. And then you actually start to talk to the people involved, and it's, you know, it's very clear that there's, you know, the tank next to you might be firing, you might be sitting on the decks, on the ranges, and you're taking in this kind of phenomenal, you know, amount of blast from the main armaments on Challenger 2s and so on. And then there's guys we know on CVRT. Kate's husband spent some time, I think, on CVRT, that 30mm cannon. You see pictures on YouTube of the safety officers just standing on the back deck while they're firing round after round after round after round. You know, all this exposure is damaging. Now, not everybody who's exposed gets these symptoms. We don't know why, do we? It's a very kind of heterogeneous, so you and I could be in exactly the same experiences, and one of us can come down with this 10 years later and the other doesn't ever. We don't know why that is, but for those people who do suffer, it's very real.
Yeah. What kind of signs and symptoms have you seen with people? Like you say, you can sometimes even just meet someone and be like, exactly what this is. You know, what kind of things have you started to see, especially now you're talking to more and more people, sort of outside of your husband as well? Because I know you're saying, you know, sometimes that people end up down the psychological route, and then some people end up down the neuro route.
Well,
it's
symptoms can overlap with PTSD, which is one of the hard things to do. But I relate to my husband, so he has severe headaches. And he has a baseline headache all the time. It's there, no matter what. But he has headaches so bad that he wants to put his head through the wall. That to that point of extremeness. His balance is terrible. We've had instances where people think he's drunk if we've been out. And which is quite, as a family, when you've got children around you and people commenting, it's quite horrific. And his legs go from under him, speech, unable to actually see, problems with vision, tremoring. We have a problem with that. Being able to hold items, all sorts. Memory issues are a big one. He can remember what he did in Iraq, but he can't remember if he's eaten about 10 minutes ago. It's a massive issue. And then we have anxiety, temperament, depression, things like sleep apnea is a big one also, is diagnosed quite a lot within this area. Am I missing anyone's, Paul?
I mean, no, I think you're not.
It's a catalogue, and actually they're very to the individual as well. Not all those symptoms will be that person will have the symptoms the same as the next person. My husband served with somebody else who's been in one of Paul's interviews, and his symptoms, some of those overlap, but some of those are very different to James's. So, they've been in the same places and experienced the same things, but their symptoms are very different, can be very different. But sometimes, there's a running joke about this.
There's a sort of basket from which they all come, and you don't necessarily get all of them, and you might get different ones, but they are all essentially the ones that Kate has outlined is pretty much that. It's I think James has pretty much has the lot, doesn't he, or most of them. But there's a sort of a spectrum. Not everybody gets this, but the people who do, there's a dose-response relationship. That the more blast you've been exposed to, the worse you are. That appears to be what the science is telling us, and I think that's what we see in the people we meet. There are some people who are not as bad as James, and there may be some people who are worse, but there is a spectrum. But the common things, exactly as Kate outlined: headaches, memory loss, balance, dizziness, emotional dysregulation, sleep disorders, all those things.
Which I mean, listening to when you're talking about the brain, in my head, those kind of symptoms, it makes your brain controls everything. So depending on what's been affected, literally that's the impact it's going to have on your life, and even, like you say, down to motor skills and just the pain and everything. It's everything, even sleep. The brain controls everything. So the moment you trauma it throughout with the blast, anything could end up being affected by it. But you said he had this scan that you funded to see what was going on and sort of get almost like that confirmation of what was going on. What scan is that, and what's different about it that we're just not able to see elsewhere on other scans and other sort of tests and treatments?
Meg is more about actually really how your electrics, how it's functioning, rather than the actual formation of the brain. It's about the electronics of the brain, if let's say, how it's connecting, how things are connecting in the brain. And when James had that, I say we because we're a unit, we work together, we didn't actually disclose to the people scanning or to the person that did the report what James's symptoms were, because when we had the results, I wanted to, because it's really hard within this system to believe something. You go on long and long and long, and everything becomes, it's not going to, it's not going to work. It's not going to show anything. It's and so when James's results came back, and it showed different parts of the brain and how they connected, levels of functionality, etc., it all mimicked his symptoms, how he was symptomatic. And it was the first time that we'd had anything that was that could actually go, yes, that is what's going on. That is what's going on. This is a true representation of how James is. Yeah, it's not NICE recognised. It's not something that the NHS has to recognise, but that's a different story. So it's actually a research tool currently in the UK more than anything else. Is that right, Paul?
I mean, even if they don't, what I don't understand, and you see this quite a lot, is that because because NICE haven't approved it for clinical use, neurologists will ignore it when you put it on their table. You literally can turn up, and we know about this, right? You can turn up and say, here is a Meg scanning report. This is the technology the MOD are using, by the way. There's no doubt over this technology. It's used clinically for epilepsy and for other things. So there's no question over what this technology can do. In fact, I mean, I say that there are things it may be able to do that we don't know yet. It's an incredibly powerful tool, but there's no doubts over it, whether it works or not, whether it gives you an accurate picture. It absolutely does. So even if even if it's not part of a clinical pathway, if you're scanning people and they are finding out what's wrong with them, that's a huge thing for a lot of people. And I think one of the first things I said the first time I ever spoke to Kate, I think I said, but this is such a horrific thing. Wouldn't it be better to have PTSD? Wouldn't you rather just think that you've got PTSD or whatever the thing you've been diagnosed with is? And Kate said, no, you want to know, and you won't find, she said to me, you won't meet anyone, you'll never meet anyone who says they wouldn't rather know. And that's been the case. I think I met 31 people who've got or believe they have this, and every single person says exactly the same. Where can I get scanned? How can I find out? How can I learn what's really going on with me? And that really matters to people. And when people do find out, and when families do find out, you've got that platform then to start working. And whether or not, then you have the fight that Kate's had for 10 years to get people to listen to you, but at least you know. And it's expensive, but it's totally not out of the reach of the military charities. It's certainly not out of the reach of the government. This is something that could be done. It could be done quickly, and it's not being.
Yeah. And I think for a lot of people, I think when you're fighting the system so much and you're going through all these processes and you're meeting all these doctors and all that, I think you get to a point where you feel like you're going mad. Everyone else is saying, this is fine. I don't know, this is and like you say, once you got that scan, you didn't even want to tell them, because it's like, no, I want the real confirmation. I don't want, any story that's coming out of this that they want to give. I want to know that real confirmation of I am right and I am sane, and this is that confirmation. It's soul destroying and devastating to keep fighting.
It is,
and just not
these
be
guys
heard.
and girls, high performing people, doing their job day in, day out. And now I've got my husband, most of the time he'll go, I'm a bum. That's how I feel. I feel like I'm a bum because I can't function, because I can't do this, I can't do that, or I don't feel like I just can't do it today. And to me, that's the system, because they could be helping him through all of this. Instead, it's his wife dragging him hook or crook to grasp at what is available, because I won't let our family fail. I won't let the system beat us. I will not let the system beat him. He's given too much, and we've given too much. It's a really terrible place for anybody to be, and we've been through multiple different systems that have torn us apart and torn James apart and his service apart. I mean, to serve your country is such, an amazing thing. To want to do that, to put your life at risk, to put your family on hold for however long, then for them to turn around and go, bye, no, we'll see you later, and we'll let that system over there cope with you, but they've got no idea how to, and we'll let you drown. So the system it's a trauma in itself. It's another trauma.
Kate's touched on a thing that it's the families that the families are bearing the brunt of this as well. It's the children, it's the spouses, and the people who contact us when we put a report out. We get between 3 and I think 12's been the most emails that we'll get. We get sort of comments online and other things, but we'll get directly people who actually go and look us up and email us. It's so often it's partners, mothers, and the people who are kind of making a difference in this space. Kate, Dawn Turner, and then some of the scientists. It's almost all the women who are fighting this, because you can't advocate for yourself if you're in that position. You can't. It's hard enough for Kate to navigate the system as she's outlined. How are you supposed to do that if you don't have somebody like Kate in your corner? If you're on your own and you're suffering from these symptoms, people just disengage at really early opportunity, and then they get lost, and then they become, then all those issues that we're very familiar with and come into play. The drug and alcohol dependency, problems with housing, problems with the criminal justice system, and ultimately suicide, where the Americans have shown, with huge population level studies, that there's a much higher risk of suicide for TBI patients. And, why isn't this part of the conversation? Whenever you see sort of coroners things about suicide and say it's all about PTSD, or they did or didn't have PTSD, and was it, or should it or shouldn't, this doesn't seem to be part of the conversation. And again, it's a lack of awareness, it's a lack of understanding of the science.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's just, I mean, and I think as well, there's, especially for veterans that are going through it, there must, he must feel an element of betrayal as well. Of, he served with a family that, had his back and all the rest of it. And then you walk out that gate and it's, you just left. Like you say, you're left to fight and fight and fight. And there's an element of, I think, I'd feel quite betrayed by the system. Like you say, I've given everything, my life, my family, and now I've got the rest of my life taken away
There's
from me as well
yeah,
for what I've done.
there's definitely an
And I'm
element.
just,
I mean, James
where do
loved
I
his
go from
service,
there?
don't get me wrong. I love the guys he served with, but there is that the trust has gone within that with the MOD. That has definitely left the building, to say the least. So when we're trying to build relationships with professionals now, it's so hard for him to engage because he's like, well, what is the point? Along with the fact that he's been through and within all these multiple different services, he's had to. We turned up to appointments and they go, well, why are you here? And it's like, haven't you read the notes? And they're like, and even that was with an MOD doctor serving in the NHS. It's so frustrating. And he thinks, well, why go to the next one? Why believe that the next one is going to actually do anything, create anything better, or even give me any little difference of quality of life? I mean, that's all. I don't believe there will be any ultimate cure. Can I say that? But there is a difference that can be made for quality of life going forward. And I don't think that's an expensive ask. I mean, 50 million has been put into Valor. That's a huge amount of money. I don't think that kind of money is being kind of put within the right places. I'm sure it'll make those charities very happy that that will be distributed out in those areas. And I hope it really does make difference for those people that get in contact and they signpost them to the correct places. But at the moment, if somebody with suspected TBI or a diagnosed TBI comes to them, there is nowhere to signpost them to. The big players, the big charities are not dealing with this, are not even acknowledging the fact that this exists. They're not acknowledging the families that are affected by it. Oh, but we can help you financially. Don't need financial help. We need guidance and help with the system. We need you to advocate for us at the biggest tables. And at no place within the review for the Armed Forces Covenant has there been any mention about TBI or anybody that represents that TBI aspect. No family member, no organisation, nothing like the Concussion Legacy Foundation. Nobody has been sitting at that table saying about this. Sorry.
You can test this for yourself if you go online and look at type in Department of Defence TBI, and you'll see the resources for families, resources for carers, a whole range of, I'm not suggesting this is perfect by any stretch, but there's a whole range of information there that you can just access immediately on their website. Do the same thing on the MOD website or any of the Big 10 military charities. Nothing at all. No advice, no help, no nothing. The only sort of charities who are dealing with this in the UK or involved with this are very small charities with limited funds, limited reach, limited ability to do more than their best, but the problem's bigger than that.
What level, Paul, does this need to get to for it to be seen and heard? What part of government, I think it's not really needs to?
I think I don't want to prescribe policy. I think it's it's kind of not really my job as a journalist to say what should happen in a sense, but I don't think it or how it should happen or who should do it. I don't think that's quite my role, and it's certainly not a party political thing. 100%, it's not. It's a structural system failing. But there are the things that could be done very quickly are really quite straightforward things. There are some things. Research is valuable. Pouring more money into research does matter, and the quality of the science is fantastic. And there's some guys doing absolutely mind-blowing work on this. But there are things you could just change tomorrow. Again, the Royal Colleges could get an advice for these supposedly sort of, GP-friendly, veteran-friendly GP services. They have absolutely nothing on this at all. Neurologists, again, the Royal Colleges could have a role here, the Ministry of Health could have a role here. The Ministry of Defence, I don't understand why they're not doing more. I know they want to be following the science, they want to, make sure that they're doing the right thing. We're lucky enough to have been able to interview the Veterans Minister. She wasn't hiding, she kind of came to speak to us, and that was great, and all credit to her for that. But their position is that, we're not going to do anything until we are convinced more than the existing science, which is, as I've said, is on the balance of probabilities is overwhelming. And everybody in this space, all the scientists in this space, I've not met one yet who's actually specifically researched this, as opposed to being in psychology, psychiatry and so on. But there's no question, there are no dissenting voices, So yeah, things could change. But even if all that happened was one of the big charities put some money into a scanning program, just to test, let's just see how many of these people with CPTSD diagnosis and symptoms that are consistent with TBI. Let's see what Meg says. Let's see what comes out. Just do that. It costs so little, and it will give you an idea of scale. Immediately, it would absolutely underline the fact that diagnosis isn't happening here. But for some reason, nobody thinks that's worth doing. So there are different things that should be happening at different levels, and none of that's happening. But ultimately, you can't get away from the fact that it ends up with the government, and they're the ones who could solve these problems quickly. But there's a whole layer of different things that are just not happening. As Kate says, Op Restore, we know someone who's been referred with all these symptoms and with scans to Op Restore. They've sent him to a neurologist. We won't take him till he's seen a neurologist. The neurologist has re-diagnosed him with PTSD in spite of all the evidence, disregarded the scans entirely for reasons best known to himself. So it's a bizarre catch-22 where to go and see the experts at Op Restore, you have to be sent there by somebody who has no knowledge of this whatsoever and is looking for head injuries, and if they're not finding head injuries, they're concluding there's nothing wrong with you. It's a complete catch-22. It makes zero sense, but that's the system.
And that's if you're lucky enough to get that referral.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because they can. I've got plenty of veterans that have been referred into Op Restore and they've refused at point of entry. I mean, my husband is under Op Restore for TBI, but they refused to take him for MSK. And our local services will only scan him in pieces. So that each little piece we scan, we find something wrong with him. But if we scanned him as a whole, his whole spinal area, which actually a big professional in Canada called Ben Dunkley sent me some lovely papers about the correlation between blast and spinal also. We might actually get a better picture, and we'd stop giving him so much traumatic experience of going back each time and being broken down into pieces. There's a massive problem with this system, and they don't look at people holistically. They refuse to. People don't talk to each other.
And it's important because I think the more we're learning about the effects of blast, the sort of subtle but long-term effects of blast, the more we're learning how bad it is for you. So I've been looking recently at blood vessels in the brain, sort of arterial venous malformations, cavanomas, stroke in younger people, berry aneurysms, apoplexy, pituitary apoplexy, and all these other curious brain bleeds. And we're doing some work on veterans, how many veterans have suffered with these things. And these are all really rare conditions, and it's way above what should be statistically the case. We're still sort of working on this, and it's a small and slightly unscientific sample because we're just kind of campaigners in case journalists in mine, and interested people. Essentially, we don't have the resource to do this properly, but it's really clear that brain bleeds is an issue, and we know that blast from the science is really clear that blast has long-term negative effects on the blood vessels. So that's interesting. As Kate says, it's spinal, and there's a whole range of other issues, including sort of gastrointestinal issues and so on, that we're only just beginning to learn about. So if you're not looking at this as a whole system thing from a medical point of view, then you're not going to come close to being able to deal with the issues.
And you said earlier, Kate, that is this seen as in the US? They're accepting.
Yeah, well, they're doing so much more in the US in general. So now, upon joining service, you do cognitive testing. So they at least have a baseline. I mean, it's the minimum they could do, but it's something to work from. And then their VA. I recently talked to a lovely lady who I met through another researcher in the UK, and she'd been advocating in the US for a long time within their central government about military TBI. And they are so much further ahead. But again, it has taken persistence and lobbying and continuous campaigning to get there. But they are recognising this. But for some reason, the UK seem to think this is some conspiracy theory. And yeah.
I think there's a weird irony, isn't there, that having the
Yeah.
VA is actually better for
Is
American veterans because there is a single evidence base, so they collect data from all those veterans, and so when you want to research it, it's incontrovertible. You know, the figures are all there. Whereas in the NHS, you're not seeing experts, you're not seeing people who understand veterans healthcare. They've done a sort of brief course. Some of them have done a very quick course, and you're not accessing people who know what you're talking about or know what they're talking about actually. So I think actually the VA's been great in the sense that you've got statistics to work with that people can take, for instance, the number of people with TBI and then reference them against suicide figures and do that kind of big level research, epidemiological research that tells you really clearly where the problem is. We can't do that here. It's not possible. They've got the data exactly, and it's all in the right
They've
places.
got the data weight,
as
haven't
cases,
they?
they could do more, but they're so far ahead of us.
Yeah. What's the? I mean, like you say, they do have the data weight, but the threshold of which they're holding it at to accept it is that even different to what, or is it lower, or are we holding, like you say, a completely unrealistic threshold compared to the Americans, even though they've got more of the data?
No one's diagnosed with
Is
it
it a
here.
different
Nobody gets
threshold that they're
diagnosed with
holding
it.
it at on
Kate's
that side?
managed to get a diagnosis after a decade of fighting, of shouting, of being, having to do her own research, talking to the leading scientists. That's what it takes. And I think we reckon, don't we, there's fewer than 20 people with a particular, in terms of repetitive blast exposure, sort of chronic. I would say probably in single figures would be my guess, but it's certain you just cannot get diagnosed in this country. Even though our own research, even the research the MOD rely on, doesn't say it's not a problem. It's just that there's a argument over scale. But yeah, you just doesn't happen here. They'll find anything, and the diagnosis. Kate and I know that we see the same people with the same basket of symptoms, the same history of blast exposure. It's like the same story again and again, and yet the diagnoses people have got are Meniere's disease, functional neurological disorder, cluster headache, PTSD, CPTSD, obviously anxiety, adjustment disorder, depression. There's about 15 different diagnoses that get just sticky plastered onto what is the same set of symptoms with the same medical history and the same people, this blast exposed population that we pretend is the same as everyone else, and they're just, in health terms, they're not, and it's really clear that they're not. It couldn't be more clear to me, and 100% more so for Kate.
Yeah, it's just, the more you, like I said, it's something that's not I'd ever heard of until I saw your sort of report that you put out on LinkedIn, and the more you look into it, the more and I said this to you on the phone, Kate, the more I looked into it, to me in my head it made complete sense, and it was just one of those things of, well, of course this is a thing, this is an absolute thing. But the more you sort of go into it and you look into it, I'm just lost for words at how much it's being ignored and how much of a black hole there is in the system for this, and the amount of people that must be going crazy in the NHS to the point, like you said, well, what's the point in going anymore? What's the point of taking the pills that don't work? What's the point of having these medical examinations and then suffering?
I mean, the amount of documents I've seen about services closing cases because the veterans disengaged. They've disengaged because they're really poorly. You should be engaging with, or trying to engage with them more, trying to look at them more, to see, and look at that family structure more. I mean, and it's not just the NHS, it's social, children's services, adult services, local government, ICB structure, NHS, England Armed Forces, which people don't realise that are there, but they are calling the tune on funding here. They are the ones that are supposed to be, funding these pathways. NHS England itself. It's just, there are so many organisations, or those big charities. I mean, we've come into contact with most, and I would say we are not in contact with them anymore. I mean, and there's only one charity that we still keep in contact with, and that's Mission Motorsport. And that's because they do honestly, although they don't give medical help, they support the family. And that is something that none of the other charities do. They know us, they check, we'll go to an event. And I went to an event actually at Goodwood. This is a few years ago, and we only went for a couple of hours because as much as James could tolerate. And James Cameron walked past me, and I kind of went, "Oh, that's James Cameron." It's a bit, the guy that runs it. And he turned around and he said, "Oh, I know you." And I thought, and not because of what I've been doing, but because of us as a family. And he said, "Oh, James." And he knew who James was. I mean, my husband was sectioned back in 2017, and a gentleman called Adam from Mission Motorsport turned up at the psychiatric hospital to go see him, within hours. It's that kind of knowing that someone's there, but no other charity has done that for us. Actually, it's been a justification point. Or why do you think it's TBI? Well, why would it be that? Why? To me, it's, I'm this little housewife, I would say. And yet I think, like you, this makes complete sense. Why wouldn't it? I mean, you have a bottle in a car and it's moving along and you're going across potholes and the thing's juggling, your brain is in a fluid, and then when you're causing, it just makes total sense. Anyway, I'll waffle on.
Yeah.
And it's just mind-blowing that people can still question you over it. I mean, I went to an event and I think I've said this a few times now, at the House of Commons, and some guy just went, kind of, "Run away, little girl. You don't mean anything here. Basically, you aren't a researcher. You're not someone. You have no right to be here." And I went out of that, and I was really upset. And I got home. I was travelling home, and I thought, "What on earth was I upset? Oh my God, I've got more right to be there than most of them there. They're there for the free food and drink." So I think for the people that are watching this and either are symptomatic, or questioning, actually, "Oh, is this happening to me?" Or someone in their family, or someone, a friend maybe. You're right. You're right to question it. You're right at every point. You should question it, and you should question the people that are saying no to you. Sorry.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. And it just, like you say, you're in the House of Commons, and that's what you're getting. That's the conversation you're having with an individual in the House of Commons. It's another, you go into these medical appointments and getting sort of blank looks, and I don't know what your problem is. You go to the House of Commons then, and you're getting another, what's your problem with it? Like, you do start to get to a point of, am I in a dream at this point? Is this even real? Because I'm constantly facing this.
I don't want to trivialise or be disrespectful to anyone on either side, but it reminds me of the post office scandal. Just this idea that there's this sort of system that's full of well-meaning people. It's not like there's a bad guy here. There are no bad guys. It's just that people who just can't, haven't done the work, haven't engaged, haven't curious enough to learn. I thought you said she's going for the kill.
She's going for the cat.
Disappear off the screen and not come back.
No, she's going.
But yeah, it's that kind of, people are not being listened to. Kate's got lived experience of this. Lots of people have got lived experience of this. And the patients are not being listened to. The people who advocate for the patients are not being listened to, and the science is backing them up. And when you get those that scan through and it tells you exactly what you've been saying all along, and you take it in to the doctors, they just change the subject and move on to something else. It's just quite extraordinary the extent to which the system is actively looking the other way. And as I say, it's not people being bad, it's just busy people who just don't have time for another thing, and that needs to change. It needs to be changed. it's people like Kate, like Dawn Turner, like Joe Mallon, like who are making a difference in this space, and are starting to shout. And in all of their cases, they've been shouting for a while, and it's just, my job is just to amplify that a bit, and hopefully it will heard.
Yeah, it's funny you say about the post office, because I've spoken to friends about this this recording that's coming up. I've likened it to the post office, and it was purely down to what you said, Kate, of you being told, well, it's just you're the special case, you're the unusual one, and it just felt like such a theme that this is what people in the post, even though they had evidence to say, well, it's not me, it's not just me. And it wasn't until there's a weight of people behind it that, eventually it was a case of, oh, okay, well, we might listen at this point. But at that point, how many people were then
and how many people
on their
have
own
slipped through the
thinking it was
system
just them?
already and aren't
It's
here
just them.
anymore, or are in the justice system and their life is ruined, and the people's lives around them ruined as well. I mean, we know people like that also, who the big charities are also not helping the justice system and not supporting, not really.
And this isn't niche. This just isn't niche, is it? And I know, I mean, it was one of the questions I had when I was first talking to Kate was, well, this, I kind of framed this as something that was a small group of people with extraordinary blast exposure. And then you start, we go on sort of various courses, first aid courses, safety courses, and so on, all of which have military instructors, mostly sort of special forces backgrounds, or at least, very kind of active sort of frontline type backgrounds. And I'll talk to people in the bar after, and they'll have their sort of sunglasses on or tinted glasses and so on, and they'll be teaching a subject they're intimately familiar with, and they'll be just slightly struggling to finish their sentence, or they'll just drift slightly, or whatever it might be. There are these tells that you start to see, don't you, Kate? Kate was referring to earlier. You start to see these things, think that's right, and then you'll sort of which regiment were you in, what unit were you with? Oh, I was in whatever it might be, the Commando Engineers, the Special Air Service, that we were doing this in this place, and you think, okay, and then I'll sort of casually say, do you get headaches? Yeah, awful, I've got, and then it goes, and it's the same set of symptoms, and some of them have PTSD diagnosis, some of them don't, some of them have other psychiatric diagnosis, some of them don't have any diagnosis at all, but it's the same things, and headaches, short-term memory loss, sensitivity to light, noise, dizziness, balance, it's just the same, it's exactly the same kind of toolkit, not exactly the same ones, but all from that same basket. And I'm meeting people, I've met 3 people, 4 people in the last 6 months, coincidentally, just through, and I don't go to many veterans things, but just coincidentally met people who have this, that it's not niche.
No, and when you're having those conversations and you start sort of calling out these symptoms, do you tend to see sort of this look come over their face of, my God?
Some people, yeah. Some people definitely. Other people just
getting
don't want to know, and that's completely understandable, and I get that. And indeed, it might be wrong. I'm not a doctor, who knows until you've done the work, you don't know. But other people are like, this suddenly they go away and they'll read, so can you send me stuff or whatever, and then they'll kind of go through sort of stuff online and whatever, and then they locate us. Loads of people, don't you, who'll get in touch with you and ask for advice and so on, and for resources and just for help navigating the system and all the rest of it, and people will get this all makes sense, this all fits, this is exactly what I've been saying.
It's the penny drop relief moment. And I think as well, when you're not diagnosed properly with things, I think internally you just kind of know something's not right. Even if you've got a diagnosis, there's just like, this doesn't fit. And it's not until you get that confirmation somewhere else and you go, now that's right. Now it feels right internally. And you can, like I say, you could get a PTSD diagnosis, but you could still sit there and be like, I think there is a weird sort of awareness, I think, that happens within you as well, that it just doesn't seem to sit right if it's not right.
Just with our experience of James,
do you find?
Totally, because nothing was working. There was more and more meds were getting thrown into the mix, and it was getting worse rather than better. to the point where, where you've got 4 sons, one being a small son hasn't at school, and you're in front of your husband, in front of 4 police officers, nearly being tasered because your local mental health team won't come out. And that's because they weren't addressing the issue. And the weird thing now is that now the mental health team now say, well, it's not their problem because it's a neuro issue, so they won't come out anyway. So now the mental health won't have anything to do with him. But neuro, okay, fine. But we've got Imperial in London. So James is under Professor David Sharp, who actually runs the advanced studies, the lead for it. Which, I'm quite a persistent person. I think they know that now. Imperial, and it's been a journey for us all. But we have moved along the boat. But there's very little they can do. There's really little. But they are, like Paul says, there's no nasty people within this. There is no nasty people, just a lack of pathways and a lack of, just understanding. I think actually what it means for that person to be suffering with this, what it means in their life, and how that affects their family.
And that's where I sort of related to scandal, if you like. It might be a bit strong, but we looked at. There's research at the moment with MTBI Predict. Advance is a 20-year cohort study, has been going since I think 23. No TBI report yet, no report on blood vessels or any of the other thing. I mean, I'm not. These things take time. Obviously, we want to prove right. Obviously, MTBI Predict, the other government scheme, is really sort of exciting stuff. We're not expecting it to report for a long period of time, and that is just to get us to a point where they recognise something that's been recognised in America for years and in Canada for years. So there's all these really potential therapies, potential things that might help, things that show great promise in really early trials, neurostimulation, types of neurostimulation basically. And I was talking to Ben about this the other day, one of the leading neuroimaging guys about this the other day. But when are we going to even start looking at actually helping people? If we're going to take 10, 15, 20 years to admit this is just 3,000 published peer-reviewed papers already tell you, what is already accepted by the governments in Canada, Sweden, America and elsewhere, then when are we even going to start to try and help people? By the time we actually decide this is right and actually come out with a diagnostic test and actually come out to start exploring these therapies, no one's going to be around to benefit from them. It doesn't need to take this long. It doesn't need to be this hard.
We need to stop thinking about this as a UK problem. This is a global issue. This is a partner issue, and we need to start acting as though this is. And we need to stop redoing the work that's already been done. I mean, it's so inefficient. It's so totally inefficient. There's it's so expensive. These research
and expensive
pieces are, hugely expensive. I mean, there's a great guy in Australia, isn't there, Paul, called Paul Scanlon, and oh my God, I mean, he's a force of nature. He's fantastic, and he's really heading this in Australia. But he talks to me every time. He's like, well, why are we not acting? We were going through the same thing. Why are we not acting together? We're stronger together, so why aren't we acting together? Exactly.
There are things happening sort of behind the scenes, one of which is there's going to be a sort of Five Eyes study into it, which headed by a Canadian, so I think a very senior officer, a Canadian guy anyway, and that will, hopefully that will act as a trigger for governments to kind of say, right, this is something we need to act on, but it's not going to be quick, but at least it's happening. More interestingly to me as a journalist is a NATO report. NATO have been trying to put a report out on what safe limits might be, obviously, so that we can mitigate them in training, as already happens in America and Canada and elsewhere. And that's been held up and held up and held up. I think it was supposed to be out a year ago, more than a year ago, and that just keeps getting held up and held up. And I'm told that the reason it's being held up is that there's one country keeps stopping it and saying we're not happy with this. And spoiler, it's us. So there are kind of these allied nations, they do work together to an extent, but it's not particularly coherent. There's areas where they work together and areas where they are diametrically opposed. So the government will tell you off the record, and they won't be quoted on this, and I can't find where this comes from, but they say that Americans massively overdiagnose psychiatric conditions as traumatic brain injury in order to qualify their veterans for better healthcare, which is, I'm sure, is true in some cases. That may well happen in some cases, but to account for the numbers of people being diagnosed with TBI in America, that would require thousands of clinicians across the United States to be deliberately misdiagnosing, which is professional misconduct in America, same as it is here, and it's benefit fraud in America, same as it is here. Is that really likely? Is that? It's not something you can disprove, but it sounds incredibly unlikely. And when you talk to American neurologists, or I've spoken to one in any case who says, well, I knows a number of people, a number of veterans with traumatic brain injury, and we've done cognitive tests and taken account of their history. There's a sort of self-reporting blast exposure form, and I've gone through their medical records, clinical presentation, symptoms, and usually referred for a brain scan as well. And occasionally we do other things as well, but if I'm not sure, I'll ask for a second opinion, and we'll go through all of that, and then I'll make a diagnosis of blast-related traumatic brain injury. What do you guys do when you're diagnosing someone with PTSD? 45 minutes in a room, if that? Are you a veteran? Do you have these symptoms? Yeah, tick, right, you've got PTSD, off you go. Who's more likely to be right?
Yeah, and it really is, I think, now the NHS tick. There's something changed, I know, in pretty much the last year or so. Even if you go to the doctor, something flags on my GP records. And the question is, you're a veteran, aren't you? Did you do Afghanistan? Yes. And it's left at that. That's it. That's the conversation done. And that's even with just some random doctor that went for something that's not even related to nothing, no mental health, nothing, just normal. But it was all felt a little bit like almost a prescribed tick box exercise that we've been told, well, we need to ask this now because it's flagged, or I've asked it. And you sit there and go, but that's not relevant to the conversation we're having with why I'm here. It's like that's been pushed forward, but that's almost as far as it's gone. I once sat on something, so at this point in time,
I sat on something with the NHS, and an email came through, and it was around the veteran accreditation system. And a certain person within that system wanted the GP to be named as the veteran expert. And it's kind of like, well, the answer's in the name. It's a GP, it's a general practitioner. That person can't be an expert within that section. And we had a massive argument, and never say I was not on that group anymore. But it just shows you, it's with the GP accreditation, it may be useful in some tools, fine, identification, but actually on the ground, what does that mean? What does that mean for that veteran that goes through the system? Our GP who came in and took over from a GP that retired, I mean, the GP that retired was like, Kate, you tell me and I'll do what, because I don't know, you know, and I'll do what you think that we need to do. And I'll speak to who you think we need to speak to. A new GP came in to replace him, and it said, oh, I would appreciate you doing a referral to Restore for the MSK issues. It's like, I've heard of Op Courage. I've never heard of Op Restore. What is this? So I spent, a good 20 minutes of the time we spent with her trying to explain how the system worked. It's all well and good having things, like a kite mark or whatever saying, yeah, I'm veteran accredited. We can offer, this, but actually what does that mean to that person? What is that GP learning? GPs have a very limited amount of time. We all know how overstretched they are, how limited funding, etc., etc. Are they best placed to be able to do these referrals? Should they be a self-referral from the actual veteran themselves? Like with Op Courage for Op Restore, should it look like that and cut out the middleman, per se, so it's an easier transport through the system? The system is just...
And I've seen their video that they, their sort of training video, which is sort of 50 odd minutes long, and there's 8 seconds of it devoted to TBI. And that 8 seconds doesn't mention that you can have brain injury without a head injury, which is the crucial point. If you're a doctor, that's the key point to understand. Is if you say brain injury, traumatic brain injury, they're immediately looking for evidence of a wound, of a damage to your head. And the difference with this, of course, is that you don't have that. Doesn't mention that, and therefore what's any GP supposed to glean from that 8 seconds? It just says sort of TBI is also a problem in the army, more common in America, or words to that effect, which is just nonsense. That's not helpful. The slides say the same thing. This is common in America. What does that mean? Are American brains different, or is blast different over there, or it just they're not being adequately informed. They're not being given the tools that they need to do their job, and it's not their fault, but they're not being helped. And that could be done. That could easily be done.
So if someone's listening to this thinking, the jigsaw's kind of falling into place a little bit, and they do want to reach out, and they do kind of want to communicate, how is it best for them to do that, and be part of the pack and get him kind of involved and get that support more than anything? Like you say, it's a lot of the partners that are battling this and need that kind of morale and a bit of support.
I mean, we can't estimate the amount of young carers also, sorry to put this in also, the young carers that are very are not well helped within the system in general in the UK, let alone all this added extra on top. They are a massive cohort, and we're not doing anything for them. Yeah. But I would say you do need to speak to your GP, and the correct pathway would be to speak to your GP to ask for a referral route to Op Restore. In reality, to get in contact with charities like Concussion Legacy Foundation. They have a huge amount of knowledge because they are a global charity. But also, I mean, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm Kate England, and we have a few groups on Facebook that is now starting to interlink people and them to have those conversations and not to feel alone. And that includes veterans, that includes spouses, mums, children, not younger children, but adult children. But yeah, there is a growing cohort that are now linking up. And also, I should imagine you can contact Paul at ITV News. Sorry, Paul.
You're very welcome. Completely. The vast majority of people in this situation, aren't going to be able to communicate with the media or to deal with the media, and that's understood. And it's like, it's difficult enough to talk about your health anyway publicly. And the people who've done that, Kate and James and Ian and the other guys, I don't underestimate the amount of courage that takes, to put yourself out there and to particularly on something like this where, it took people sort of 20, 30 years to talk about PTSD after, even when it became a diagnosis in 1980s. For people to sort of to kind of talk to me and to talk to the media and so on, or obviously I would say that's important, but it's incredibly courageous of people to do that, incredibly courageous, and I really don't underestimate what people are putting themselves through to do that, and I have enormous amount of respect for everyone who's done that.
Yeah, absolutely. I have like I say, a huge amount of respect for you both and you, Kate, to just keep going for this long. It's just, yeah, I'm lost for words. I really am. And it really saddens me that we're in this state and it's 2026 and we've gone through Afghanistan, Iraq. You could. And
you look where we are now also.
You could just keep going at this point. And
you're looking where we are now as well. So exactly. And I appreciate you saying it to me, but actually there's so many of us, I might be if you Google me, I may be the one that comes up, but actually there's so many people advocating and trying so hard to put this forward. And I can't thank Paul enough for putting this in mainstream media, because there's, nobody's really wanted to touch this with barge pole. It's been such a hot potato, hasn't it? And between him and his team, they've been extraordinary. Yeah. And the fact that they keep going and keep pushing is fantastic.
Yeah. Honestly, incredible. And without that report, Paul, that's what got me onto it as well, even though veteran myself, honestly, it was the first time I'd heard of it, and just, it has really blown me away how, we're hit, it's 2026, like, seriously.
I mean,
why are we still having these battles? If it all functioned
properly, you wouldn't need the media for this. You'd be listening to the patients and you'd be reading the science, but yeah. It's a pleasure and it's a privilege to work on this story on behalf of my brothers and sisters who served and their families.
Thank you very much, Paul, and thank you very much, Kate. Keep going, and I hope to see you soon, Kate.
And we plug that as well.
At Nottingham.
Yes, so currently organising with Nottingham and Birmingham universities, Veteran Military TBI Symposium. Now, veterans are very welcome to this. It is a free event. Their spouses, their carers, please do come along, because actually your voices do matter. And also, if you don't feel you're able to give your voice, your feet matter. And you being there is fantastic. But whatever happens, if you can't come, there will be a document coming from this, which we'll try and widely distribute to everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll share the details as well with the podcast, and absolutely send it to me too, and I'll share it as much as I can and get it out there. And I'll absolutely see you there. It's in my diary. I've blocked it out. I've registered and everything, and it was super easy to register as well. So, yeah, I encourage and everyone who wants to hear this and wants to be seen as well, to go along, because it's not right that people are sat on their own and being told it's just you're the special case. That's not right. That's not right. And
Stronger together.
there is that power in numbers. So yeah, definitely we need to do it together and keep going. Absolutely. Thank you very much, you two. Keep going, keep fighting, and I'll do what I can, what little bit I can, to just keep putting the word out for you guys as well. Thank you very much.